And we're live.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of The Time and Place, the gospel conversation show where we discuss faith on the fringes and do our best to apply God's word to God's world. I'm Solomon, this is Julian, and today we're talking about Sizzler. No, I'm just kidding. Today we're going to talk about being all things to all people, 1 Corinthians 9. But first, Julian, what the heck is going on in the world today?
Too many things.
It's been a couple weeks.
Yeah, it's been a couple weeks. And in that time, vaccine mandates if you have a job. Newsom is still the governor. Nicki Minaj got canceled. Norm Macdonald died. The world fell apart in a week.
He got double canceled.
He got double canceled. He got actually canceled.
He got real canceled. Yeah.
I mean, where to start?
I know. It's crazy. So the vaccine mandate, that was a big one.
That was huge.
So Biden has this method of this routine of saying something's unconstitutional and that he can't do it.
Doing it.
Anyway. And Obama did the same thing with the DACA dreamers, right? They're like, well, I wish I could just,
right.
Give them immunity, whatever, but it's unconstitutional. What can I do? And then a few months later, I'll do it.
Yeah. Well, he was the one that had the quote. He was like, if Congress can't move, I have a phone and a pen, and that's all I need.
Phone and pen.
And it was like, I didn't know we could just do things that way.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what it's becoming, man. It's like we just vote for our dictator every 4 years. I guess we can vote, but it's the dictator. Now,
right.
We vote for our king every 4 years. And then he just decides. And then it's just going to be what the one side wants.
Yes.
Right? It's like, okay, now the other side, hopefully, if there's no screwing around with elections, can that's our only hope, is that fair elections, real strict elections, is well, at least we get to vote the dictator, vote for a new dictator.
Well, I think that's why that point was so hammered this past election, because that was the biggest switch I ever saw. It went from Russia rigged the election, Trump is a false president, to elections are bulletproof and you should never question them. There's no way anybody could cheat.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, well, whose side is saying that? The side who won.
The side who won.
Well, exactly. Of course. It's weird, man. It's so weird. Someone talking about it, they're saying this goes us only a few ways. This ends up only a few certain ways. And one of those is just that, well, that's just it now. We just vote for our dictator and our king, and then they do an executive order to pass whatever they want, unconstitutional, whatever, doesn't matter. And, that we just hopefully can vote, and the elections stay fair and stuff. Or people start getting really upset, and there being it kind of splits out into the states, of just California is going to be its way, and Texas is going to be its way, and New York and everywhere else, Florida is going to be its way. And and if we're okay with that, if we're okay with letting California just be California and letting Texas be Texas, then okay, we can live like that, I guess, for a little while, but we're not going to be you can't go to California unless you're vaccinated. You know what I mean? It's going to end up that kind of stuff. If you're going to have a company in California, then you're going to have vaccine mandates. Right. And I think that almost would be the better way. The problem is this federal government of okay, it's all of us. It's well, we don't all want to be on that same boat.
Right.
And we're okay with being in our different boats. What if we said that? Just I'll just live in Texas and not have to worry about the mandate or whatever. And if no one likes it, they can move to Portland, Oregon. And it's okay, and they can do it there. But if the president is coming out and saying everyone across the country has to do this, then that's, I don't know. It's just I think it's better if everywhere just stays different. But everything's so small now. That's the problem. Is that I think it kind of used to be able to be that way before globalization and before the flattening of everything was just made the world shrank.
Right.
And so you can be a citizen of the world, and so it's easier to travel, it's easier to communicate and everything. It's you can be in California today, and it's not how it was before. You had to take weeks, Right. And so it was just so much further, and so it was so much different. But now everything's been shrunken so much that we all kind of treat it like we're all in the same town.
Right.
But we're not. But really not. But it seems that way through the internet and everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's crazy because it's like you said, the downside of being connected to everybody is that you're connected to everybody. And it really does feel like that. Like we don't think about how different cities are anymore. Just from San Antonio to Austin to Dallas are so different, much less Texas to California. Like that, those might as well be other worlds, and we just don't think about it that way.
Yeah.
But that idea did kind of start to float out too with the Texas abortion law when Portland was like, well, we're going to ban trade and travel from Texas. Like you're going to ban trade and travel from your country, another place in your country.
Yeah. It's like an embargo between the states or something. Tariffs and stuff. Yeah.
It's nuts.
I know, man. It's really weird. That's how it's going to be. We're going to have, I think it's going to split up like Doug Wilson's book, that he wrote before all this. Of the free states and what is it? I think that with the pandemic, because his didn't have a concern of pandemic,
right? Yes, that was a little different.
But I think with this, it would be split up into the free states and the safe states, right? The safe states of America and the free, because both of those sound positive too,
right?
Ourselves, it's like pro-life, pro-choice. Well, we're like choice and life. So I mean, it's never like anti-choice, anti-life. It's pro or anti, whatever. They will say anti-abortion, this or whatever, instead of pro-life. But yeah, so I think that's what it's going to be, man. It's like the free states and the safe states, and I'd rather be in a free state than a safe state, but it is safe. You know what I mean? Like it's weird. Like it's really weird, especially if people. It's like that's one of the biggest things I don't understand with this whole vaccine thing is like how at this point when vaccines are on every street corner, how is this not on them? You know what I mean? Like we have a pandemic of the unvaccinated, but they can be vaccinated, and they're choosing not to be. Well, okay. How is it at that point not just like, well, then that's just them. Let's go about our daily lives. I'll get vaccinated, live my life, and if someone doesn't want to, they're rolling their dice. Okay, but we're not allowing people to roll their dice. Right. You know what I mean? We're not allowing people to make those kind of choices for themselves in whatever way they've chosen that way. But again, it's this whole abortion thing, like choice, my choice, and me and my doctor, and me and my doctor have spoken. And it should be this should be a choice made between a woman and her physician on whether she should get the vaccine. I mean, whether she should get an abortion, Right. And it's like one for one thing, but not the other, right?
Right. Well, that was the weirdest thing too with the mandate was Biden's big thing was like, my patience is running out.
Yeah.
Like I've given you all enough time to do the right thing. Now I'm telling you to do the right thing.
But how is it even the right thing of like, it doesn't matter. Like it's my choice, isn't it? Like how has this stopped the country from moving on and completely opening up? And like that's the biggest. I've never heard an answer of like how is this just not on them? This is on you. If you get sick, it's on you.
And see, and I would understand if the vaccine was actually what it was supposed to be. Like, oh, you can't catch it, you can't spread it, you can't die from it. But it's none of those things. You can still catch it, you can still spread it, and you can still die from it. So
yeah, they're saying both things. They're saying two things. They're saying you have to get the vaccine. Oh, by the way, the vaccine you're still in danger.
Right. So, well, then why?
Yeah, it's like they don't even know what they want at this point. It's weird, man.
It's become that illusion of safety. Like if we all do this, we'll all be safe.
But then they're telling you you're not safe still.
Right. But it's too like it. That's the we're thinking hysterically. We've been thinking hysterically for 2 years, and we can't switch it to have like a clarity moment at any point.
Well, it's like if we fix it, then what are we going to complain about? What are we going
to blame?
Protest about? Yeah, right. Fault. Like, well, we can't have solutions, because then we got to find something else to freak out about.
Yeah,
we haven't yet. Maybe that's what it is. We got to have that other thing to like freak out about. Then we can kind of like let this one go. What were we freaking out about before COVID, before pandemics and vaccines stuff? What were we freaking out about? Trump, I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, not really. Like half the country was freaking out about Trump.
Yeah,
it was really. I mean, there wasn't. Yeah, but there wasn't a lot to freak out about. Like the economy was pretty good, jobs were pretty good. Like nothing was crazy.
But he said mean things in tweets.
And that was a bridge too far.
He tweeted mean things. He said he loves Hispanics while eating a taco bowl.
That's something I do. Why
we
is that
can't
wrong?
have this kind of evil in our country?
Oh man, it's gotten nuts. And then like immediately, like the usual suspects came out and said that they're going to refuse to cooperate. All the governors of the specific states, and the map did look like the Doug Wilson breakdown.
Right.
That's what was crazy.
That's what I'm saying. It's all the ones you expect. Texas, Florida. Right. Like it's all the ones you already know.
And even some of the blue ones, like Arizona. Arizona was blue, and they still were like, "No, we're not doing this."
Arizona's only blue because of Trump and the whole McCain thing, because it flipped blue in this last election. And that was weird, man. It was weird watching the election, and because Arizona was supposed to go red.
Right.
But we weren't really sure. And because of the whole John McCain, Donald Trump rivalry thing, and like how everyone in Arizona hated Donald Trump because he crapped on John McCain. and then they just like, but it's like, do you hand over the country that because of that? You know what I mean? You're letting a personal feud, a personal, like everything. Like I agree. Like it was crappy what he said, and it was not okay. But I'm not gonna like just hand the country over to,
right?
A bunch of communists because I don't like this man. What it really came down to really was the person over the policy,
right?
And vice versa, and just that's how people were voting. It was just like I just don't like his personality. It's
right.
like yeah, but look at the judges he's appointing. He's the policy. You know what I mean? It's like. Oh, everybody putting so much weight on the president, which again, the king, the dictator, the man, and so it's like this is not a king. This is not, but it has become that, and it's just, and I think it's just our culture and television and just whatever else of like, well,
right.
who, we've got this Game of Thrones mindset of like who's gonna sit on the throne,
yes.
Like that means something, House of Cards, like all these things, like president, you become president, and then you can just wave your magic wand, and then you have the gun. You've got the magic wand, and you could do whatever you want now for 4 years or whatever. And it's like, what did this happen? Like, what happened to that? Like, that shouldn't have been the way. Like, the president's supposed to be like a mascot, basically, of like, a figurehead, like a symbolic position or something. Executive order.
That's it is. Yeah, and it is the TV thing because that's how that was Kennedy. Kennedy switched that all when the TV came in, and you could see him, and it was like, oh, he's handsome and he's charismatic, and I like him. And then that became a weird thing of like, president I'd like to have a beer with. Like, I wouldn't vote for anybody who I would like to have a beer with to be in charge of anything. That's a terrible way to make that decision.
Yeah. I know. I think of anybody I've had a beer with. I'm like, I wouldn't any of that.
And you end up with Bill Clinton playing saxophone on TV, and that wins him the election.
Oh man, like it's so weird, dude. Like it's such a crazy time. I don't know. Yeah, the vaccine mandate. That's a weird one. There's gonna be lawsuits. There'll be resistance.
Oh, for sure.
And it'll get tied up so much that it just won't happen.
I wonder is if it's going to be the thing, because they're piling up. Things are piling up, like his son scandal, the Middle East situation just falling apart, the vaccine mandate. Like these things are stacking. I wonder what is going to cost him the election, or if it's not going to matter, like the next election.
Yeah. Well, I think he already knows. I'll be surprised if he chooses to run for another term. I mean, he'll be in his 80s.
Yeah, but I mean,
and he already said that he's a placeholder president. He already said that, like, well, I'm paving the way for someone, and we just need to get Trump out and stuff. So I think he kind of always knew that he was just the like not Trump candidate.
Well, who's in his mind? Who's he holding the place for? Because everybody behind him is more unlikable than him.
Yeah, I know, man. Yeah, I don't know. That's a big question of like. Yeah, who would it be? Who would he said about Pete Buttigieg or something, but nobody likes him either.
Yeah, nobody really does.
I don't know, dude. I don't know who it would be. I'm trying to think of like Democrats, and
well, the one person who was the perceived golden boy who held on to his state in this week's recall was Newsom. I guess not recall because he hung on to it, so
yeah,
he's still there.
Which is a great triumph. A blue state stayed blue. Like, right. Great.
Like, we voted for the same.
Shocking. Yeah.
We don't like change.
Yeah. Do you think that's like the final? California is just F now? Like,
I don't know what else there would be. Like, if you were thinking about leaving California, that cemented it. Like, you're out at this point.
It's so weird, man. Like, it just to hear the stories that coming out of there, like people moving from there. Man, it's like, why would you want that? Like, it's like, oh, pay taxes and got to do your part. Like, but for what? They're not doing anything. They're just, homeless people in your front yard, right? And you're paying insane property taxes. Like, what are you doing? What's, what are you paying your taxes for if your whole country, your whole state, it sucks?
Because they're still holding on to that mystique of what California used to be. Like that promised land mentality of America, where at first it was a gold rush, then it was Hollywood, and it was like beautiful California and the dream of the West. But all that's dead. It's not there anymore.
Well, all that is all over the rest of the country.
Right.
It's that globalization, dude. It's like, you don't have to be there to make movies. You don't have to go to Hollywood. Like, that's not the only place where people are doing stuff, So I think people are realizing that. And it's like, well, I can do this from anywhere. I can kind of, or I can be on a plane and be there in 5 seconds if I need to.
Right. And then come back and not have to stay there.
Yeah. Live here full time, whatever. Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of the like celebrities especially are kind of realizing all the tech people and stuff are kind of just like, we can make microchips anywhere. Like, we don't need to be here. It was a cultural thing at first, but then, yeah, it's the globalization and the shrinking of society. Yeah, you can just be kind of anywhere. And I think people are realizing that.
And there was, I'm saying the secondhand, I saw it from Tim Pool's channel, but there was reports in the California recall election that some Republicans who were showing up to vote were being told by the voting machines that they had already voted when they had not.
Oh, man.
So it's starting to look like those voting machine bugs are more of a feature than a bug.
Well, I don't know. Whatever, man.
I don't know, but it's getting weird.
You can't trust anything. There's nothing.
You really can't.
Nothing's true anymore. There's nothing. You can't.
That's the age. I think that's the age we're in now. Because I think the postmodern age was like, what is truth? And now it's like nothing is true.
Or in the post.
There is no truth.
Yeah, we're in the post-truth world.
Yeah. Now you have to make your own truth because nothing is true. There is nothing.
Well, it's just it's like, well, you just have to believe something at a certain point, right? You hear information here. Oh, the machines are tampered with. Oh, they're not. And then it's like, well, okay, I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. Like, how do you know who's telling the truth anymore? Like, there is a truth. Either the things are glitching out or they're not, but we don't know. Everything's getting handed to us, and everything's through a filter.
And it's to the point where, that could have happened, and it could be an honest to goodness glitch. It was just a mistake. Nobody did anything underhanded, but everybody is so heightened right now and untrustworthy of everything that it's like, no, it was on purpose. This proves it, and it just like confirms everything they already believe.
Just don't have time. People don't have time to like stress out about these conspiracy theories and just like different things. And I think people just check out, and then I don't know, man. It's just weird.
Well, the other things, this one was the most interesting because this was this morning, and I was like, what is we're living in a simulation. I'm starting to think, because this is so next level parody. Nicki Minaj got temporarily suspended from Twitter for retweeting Tucker Carlson and spreading vaccine misinformation.
I think the Twitter machine just didn't know what to do with that.
It was like a couple of years
hang
ago.
on, we gotta shut this down because we have a retweet of Tucker Carlson from Nicki Minaj. So something is obviously glitching out. The software is messing up or something. We had to shut it down for a second because it's broken.
That would have been great if like the internet turned off for like 5 minutes to reboot.
Hang on, guys, hang on.
This can't be right.
Yeah, this can't be right. We got something going on wrong. Something's way off.
A couple of years ago when Jesus is King came out, I had posted a thing that was like, who would have thought? And it was a picture when Kanye interrupted Taylor Swift at the VMAs. And I posted, who would have thought when this happened that 10 years later, one of these people would be supporting Planned Parenthood and one would be talking about Jesus. And it wouldn't be the one you would think. This was the same thing. Like, who would have seen Nicki Minaj retweeting Tucker Carlson?
Is Nicki Minaj even like a thing anymore? Like, is she famous anymore?
I mean, she's famous enough to where people freaked out when she said something.
Guess, but it's like, who cares? Like,
somebody does. I mean, that's the Wilson pointed this out one time, and I think it's true to an extent. Is that
close personal friend of
Doug Wilson, right? Who we're expecting to have dinner with anytime now.
Yeah.
He pointed out with Trump that the whole Trump abortion thing, because in reality, Trump was not hard on abortion. Like, he just really wasn't. Right. I think he was kind of indifferent on it. But the thing that Wilson pointed out was it didn't matter that he wasn't. What mattered is that the other side reacted as if he was. And that's what was important. You could tell their allegiance to abortion by the way they react to who they think might maybe get in the way of it. And that's what was weird about the Nicki Minaj thing is like, it doesn't matter if she's super famous or if she is even influential, but everybody freaked out when she went off script. And that just really exposed their devotion to the script. That was the big thing. It was like orthodoxy. She went she went outside of orthodoxy.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it is what it is. It's just these drifts. It's like you drift left or drift right or whatever. If what you're saying drifts right, or what you're saying drifts left. And I think it's become so clear. You know, if anybody, you don't know the person, you never met them in your life, don't know them from Adam, but you just meet them and say, hey, how's it going? And they say, these vaccines, man. Just from that, you know what I mean? Alarm, like signals go off, and it's like, I don't like this guy.
You're putting together a backstory. You're figuring out where they came from.
Yeah. And it's like, that's what it is. Yeah. You know who they are now because they said one word or
right.
And yeah, man, it's just weird to watch, like, just like see all the commentators and all the people, cultural relevant people talk and stuff. And, you get a guest on and it's like, what side are they on? Where are they at? What's going on here? It's crazy, dude.
It's weird. It's the world we're living in. It's really no neutrality, but in a very different way than we talk about no neutrality. It's left or right, and that's the only option. There's no other thing you can be.
What do you think about the person who is like culturally aloof and might just say something? Because there's something that Lewis brought up about Chandler and how he's like so out of social media, so out of the culture that he'll say something that's woke and he doesn't know it's woke. And people are like, Chandler's woke, and like freak out. And it's like, but he's like, what? What's woke?
Right.
It's like, I'm a little suspicious of stuff like that because it's like, you have kind of responsibility to know what you're saying and know what kind of narrative you might be sounding like you're drifting towards or something, I guess. Maybe or maybe not. Maybe that's the way to go, is just to be like, I don't know, I'm just gonna say whatever. Yeah, like,
Well, I think the majority of people, like your average person, probably is out of the loop. Like they get the information they see on the news and maybe like what a Facebook friend shares, and that they're not digging into stuff. And they like you said, they don't have the time. There's too much going on. I just got out of work. I don't want to hear about this for the 80th time from some other person. Like, I don't know. This is what I heard. Bill Burr talks about that, where he's like, I don't know. I turn on the TV, and if they say wear a mask, I wear it. If they say don't, then I don't. I don't know. Whatever they say, that's what's going on.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what a way to. I'm glad it's just a mask and not. You know what I mean? Like,
but that's the thing. Like, this
is there anything they can say that you won't do?
But that used to be normal. Like that idea of like, well, it was on the news. What's wrong with it? That used to be like a normal thing. The news reported news.
Yeah.
It wasn't what it is now. You could afford to be aloof back then because there was no reason for you to be suspicious of anything that somebody would be trying to tell you.
I think we just never get off the merry-go-round. This 24-hour news cycle thing is like, it's just constantly there. We have it on our phones and on social media and everything. It's just constant podcast. It's the constant stream of your narrative, right?
Yes.
Versus like, okay, nightly news is over. Let me let's go to sleep, and then I'm not going to see anything again until I come back at 6 o'clock again and like see the news. And then it's like, okay, something happened, during the day. Or I'll open up my newspaper. What happened? Let's see what happened. And then it's like, okay, it's like the curse of the hot take. Everybody's got to have something like this happen right now, and everybody's on Twitter is talking about it right now, and they're saying something about it, and they're making judgments, and they're doing evaluations, and making making statements and stuff. And it's like, this just happened. It's it's happening.
Do you remember when that gymnast pulled out of the Olympics? The one who's like, I forget her name, Simone Biles.
Yeah,
she's like the best ever. And she pulled out, and she said it was for mental health reasons. And everybody had hot takes on both sides right away, right? And it was very vague. She was like, it's mental health. I just can't focus right now. And then eventually it came out that like, oh, her aunt died. And she was like, I can't compete.
She didn't have her medication.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of like real things going on, but we have to have an opinion right now.
She's a disgrace.
Right.
I can't even believe it. Yeah. I know, man. It's like you gotta be. It's like you get points for calling it.
Yes.
Or something. It's like, well, I knew it, especially before it happens. Right. Or something. It's like, oh, this is gonna happen, and it does, and you're like happy because you called it. It's like this is Afghanistan fell apart. Are you happy that you called? Are you happy about that? But you're like, that's how it is. You get those points.
That's what I get from the Matt Walsh types, like the real like rage baity conservatives. Like it's almost like they're glad when something falls apart.
Yeah,
because they get something to rage about for a while.
Yeah, man. I know it's weird. It's a whole thing, dude. I don't know. But so speaking of being aloof and just kind of a responsibility of knowing, that kind of segues into what we're talking about tonight, of being all things to all people. And as we're talking about this whole like tribalism, everybody has a side and narrative, and everybody's got a place in everything. So, we talk about, see Paul talk about in Corinthians, become all things to all people, right? So what is he, let's talk about that, because that's kind of a one that I think gets misunderstood a lot. I've become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. I do it all for the sake of the gospel, that I might share with them in its blessings. 1 Corinthians 9, 22 and 23. So what do you think? I mean, like, what's that, kind of, or what have you known from the past about that, of like, we both grew up in church. So like, what was that mean?
It always was kind of the, invite your friends to church, invite your friends to youth camp, invite your friends to, whatever. We're doing stuff for the community. We're inviting the kids around. My uncle was really good about this kind of thing. My uncle was one of those guys that was like, drive the church van. And it was like, we're going to go up and down the neighborhoods. We're going to pick up all the kids who might want to come, but can't get a ride, or their parents aren't here or whatever. And that was his thing for years. He would do that, drive, pick everybody up, and I would ride with him. And it was always funny, because it was always me and him driving to pick up kids all over the neighborhood with Carmen or some cassette tape that not relevant, but he thought it was.
God in America.
I think it was more addicted to Jesus, because that was hip, that was talking to the kids in their own language.
Yeah.
But
drug use.
That was always kind of my earliest picture, I think, of that idea of being all things to all people, is like, I'll meet you where you are.
Yeah. What is that, being all things, though? Like, I'll be all things to all people.
It's the,
because that sounds like a change in you. You know what I mean? It's like, we're supposed to be in Christ and find our identity in Christ, but I'm gonna be all things to all people. And it's like, well, should we be Christ, like Christ?
Well, it's a little different for us, right? Because when Paul's talking about it, he's talking in the context of Jew and Gentile. Like, if I got to eat clean to reach the Jews, I'll do it. If I got to make this temple tax to reach the Jews, I'll do it. But if I need to cast that off, if I need to put away my prayer shawl to speak to the Gentiles, I'll do that too. But we don't have that divide anymore so much.
Yeah.
We have like, our cultural stuff is a little different, I guess. It's more of like what are you into? What's your thing? Where are you at? Where do you hang out? What do you like?
See, and that's kind of what I thought it meant growing up. This passage growing up, I always thought it was, because especially in high school, there was the groups, right, of like the emo kids or whatever, and then like the ROTC kids, and then like like all the different kind of kid, FCA Christian kids, or something. And, what I mean? They all had like these little camps and stuff. And I always thought it was like super valuable and super cool to be like versatile and like really universal in that. Like don't pick a box. Like don't put me in a box. That was my biggest thing in high school and stuff, was like I immediately saw all these, because I came from homeschool, and I homeschooled till high school. And even in homeschool, like the group, like we had like groups, and even at church and stuff, you would have different kind of groups of people. So I was kind of aware of it, but then it was really evident in high school. And so I immediately saw the boxes and was like, okay. And it was like, you had to represent your thing, like the scene kids or whatever. It was like, that was it. You were that kid, or the sports guys. Like they were just like, hey, I play basketball, that's my thing. And then, or the burnout kids who are super into like, the whatever bands. It was a lot of it revolved around music,
Right. Yeah.
And, but so it was like, you wore the t-shirt, you wore the haircut, it was almost like they all came with uniforms almost.
They did. Yeah, they really did.
Right. Like the FCA Christian kids just had like gym shorts and like the slides on, and then like they're like a visor or something, and always just like a tennis, like a t-shirt, like a, Mac t-shirt or something. And then, the studded belts and the haircut, over one eye, it was like, there was a look that everybody had.
Right.
And my thing was like, I don't want to be so transparent or like predictable, as far as like take one look at me and what box I'm in. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to know everything about all the boxes. I wanted to know about sports. I wanted to know about, like whatever music, the emo music. I wanted to know about anything, like all of it. And so that was kind of the all things to all people. Like, I want to know everything about your social group and cultural group or whatever, but not be that, not look like I know it. You know what I mean? I want to be very unassuming.
You were a cultural anthropologist.
Yeah, but like for all of them, I wanted to just be able to have a conversation with the ROTC kid and the theater kid and the sports guy and the emo kid and the, what I mean? And it's just like, know their bands, know their stuff, and know whatever they liked and were into, and then like them to be shocked that I know about their thing, I guess, whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
see, so I had the opposite of you, and I think I still do. I haven't shaken it off completely, where there were things that I was like, I don't care, I don't want to care, I don't know, I don't feel like knowing, I just am checked out completely on whatever thing that is.
Yeah.
Which is a hindrance, especially now. It's become more of a realization to me that like that's not really a good way to go about things. But
yeah, I mean, there were some things like I tried way too hard in high school to like anime, and
explain what that means. I tried way too hard. What is that?
Like, I'd watch Dragon Ball Z or like whatever was popular at that time and stuff, or like Pokemon even, and when it was popular and out and everything, and I was like, I just don't like this. Like, this sucks. Like, I don't know. I'm not into it. I don't like the voices. I don't like the animation. I just don't like anything about this, And but like a lot of people I knew liked it. It doesn't work.
Yeah, you froze on your camera. You're lagging a little on your mic.
Yeah, I'm frozen right now. The video's frozen.
You're frozen right now. I am fully. Everything's still on. Everything's still live. We're just vocals only. Oh, there we go. You're coming back. I got motion.
You're messing us up with your new camera setup.
Well, I thought it would work. Our unpaid IT intern told me this was a good solution.
It was wrong. That's why you don't upgrade. That's why you don't do new things.
That's what I thought. That's why I didn't learn about people's
download the new things, mess it up, and something's going to be incompatible. So don't try new stuff.
Switching camera.
Don't try anything new.
There we go.
It ain't broke. Don't.
Now we shouldn't. Now it shouldn't be laggy at the very least.
Yeah, that's what you get for trying new things.
Well, I'm trying to be all things to all. Lewis is interested in IT. I want to be interested in IT. That's what I want to bring that to the table.
Yeah.
So, I mean, did you? I know we're talking about, because we've talked about before with music, where you never wanted to be like this guy, right? You wanted to know a little bit about all kinds of music. Did you, as a teenager, see that as like an evangelistic help? Or did you use it in that way at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the idea, but then it was always that step to, bring up Jesus,
Right.
To be able to have natural conversations, I think was kind of the idea or the thing in my head of like, well, if I can naturally pick up on anything they're talking about and have some kind of conversational knowledge about it, then I can relate to people and, like I said, where they are and kind of know where they are. And then from there, share the gospel. And I think it did work sometimes a little bit. But it was still that effort of just talking about Jesus and bringing it up instead of just like, talking about their music they like or whatever. And that you don't like it, but it, I guess.
And I feel like that becomes a trap too sometimes in like a culturally relevant, when we're trying to be all things to all people, we can fall into that friendship evangelism that never turns into evangelism. Mm-hmm. And I think that's and it kind of has morphed into that seeker sensitive idea. Like, we'll make this a place you want to be, but then we'll never actually like give you the thing that you're supposed to be here for.
Yeah. And honestly, I think when we're talking about picking a side and having a narrative and having, falling into a tribe or whatever, I think we talk about this with my church about like today's culture is upfront with everything.
Right.
And it's okay. I think we need to be comfortable in that kind of tension of just saying, wearing your jersey, out there and just being like, yeah, I'm a Christian, or yeah, I'm, whatever. And you might have a certain cultural understanding of what you think that means, but it's probably not. But having those conversations,
right.
And that's, because everybody is out front with it. I think a lot of people used to be that kind of, let's talk about neutral things. And then I'll slowly reveal, my radical socialist, theories or something. And now it's just, you're evil if you don't want socialism, or something, or like you don't have compassion. And it just becomes this like everybody's loud and proud, right?
Yes.
And it's like, okay, well, but that's becoming more and more more culturally acceptable. And so I think we need to kind of lean into that collision and lean into that, but be able to have those conversations and stuff with that of like, but that also comes with knowing where we stand on a lot of things. Right. And I think that's a big problem for Christians, is that Christians don't know what they actually believe or why they believe it. And so you can't be loud and proud about something that you've just never studied up on. So we don't.
So I want to turn it a little bit, because we had a conversation this week after I had a meltdown. One of the things that I love about Solomon is that he'll call you like actually on the phone, and we'll hash out ideas like actually in speech, not just through text. Yeah, yell at me for something, or ask me my opinion on it. That's if the phone rings, I know it's not like small talk. Something important is going on. Either you're working through an idea, or I said something stupid and I'm like, oh, he's gonna yell at me for an hour. But we were talking about that a little bit, and I've been dwelling on this thought in my head of my own shortfall in this area. And we were kind of talking about how all things to all people is obviously, the text is evangelistic, but I think it has a discipleship aspect to it too, and kind of a unity aspect to it. And I think the trap that I've fallen into, and maybe a lot of people who kind of have the similar mindset of me, is that we have it all outward, like everybody out there, all things to all people, but not inward, back at the church itself. And there's a tendency to kind of write off anyone as like, oh, we don't get along, or like, oh, I have a hard time connecting with people. And what I really mean is nobody is like me. That's been at the new church we're at now. Well, I guess not new anymore. We've been members for like 2 years, but the church we're at now, that was a big difficulty for me up front, because it's made up of a lot of like current and ex-military, which, you know, throw me in there and I'm outdoorsy people, hunting people. I'm talking about like, well, I just read Dark Knight again. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah. No, I think so too. I've been with my church from the living room, and I think it kind of constantly felt like a outsider, or like different than everyone, because everyone is like hipster kind of coffee and beards and reformed, you know, and I'm reformed, but like I don't know anything about coffee. I don't know anything about
growing a beard.
Yeah, grow a beard. And but I've never like felt, I don't know, maybe it's because I've been with the church from the beginning. I felt like the guy, like what, like this is my home, and you know, and everybody coming in is like, okay, you can come in, but I've never felt like distant from people. It's just like, you like going camping and making your own coffee, and I don't, and that's okay. I like watching Star Wars, like, and that's, you know, we can kind of lean into those things. That's not to say we can't, you know, take from each other either, you know, of like learning about coffee or something. I don't know, right. Or like, I don't know. It's kind of weird, but I think that's kind of a peer pressure cultural thing too. But I don't know. You got to be yourself. Like, you got to be, you know, who God has called you to be, in like your own convictions, especially on those kind of things. And I think with that, you know, like where I connect with people at church is on the important things, like
right.
doctrine and gospel and Christ, and it's like, and that's supposed to be where we find our identity anyway.
Yes,
ultimately,
right.
And so if we all unified in that identity, I mean, we can really be close, even though we're all coming from different worlds and different cultural interests and stuff, you know.
And I think that's where I kind of circled back around to is two things. I stumbled into this idea of like where I'm messing up and what I'm actually afraid of that I think is okay to be afraid of. One is that identity thing. That's where I was messing up. And I think that even though we have that church unity in that sense that we're all in Christ, and this should be where we find our identity, oftentimes when walking into a room or interacting with people, I will still have my other checklist of like, well, this is my identity. I like comic books and film and painting and MMA or whatever. And those are my identity. And if you don't hit those boxes, like, well, we're just different people. I don't know how we're ever gonna get along. And I think a lot of people do that. Maybe not as many people as, maybe not people who are well-adjusted and normal, but people like me who are like, have to have a thing to be like, I don't know, passionate about, and can't just be like okay with stuff. There's a lot of people who are like, this is my identity. This is what makes me, this is my life right now. And we don't turn that off even at church. Yeah.
Yeah. And so instead of finding unity and identity in Christ, we have other standards, cultural, political, or personal standards or ways that we are, that become more defining for us than the gospel in Christ.
I remember one time, I don't want to name any names just because I don't think any of them would see this, because half this group doesn't go to church anymore, but we were all in the same small group. And I don't know how the conversation turned to politics, but it was well before the last election. And we had a Trump party, a Biden party, and a conspiracy party all in the same room, and all kind of cross talking about stuff. And one person's like, I don't know, I just love Trump. And one person's like, well, I don't know, I think his policy on immigration is bad. And one person's like, I don't know, have you guys looked into Pizzagate? And it's just, it was literally like that all over the room. And I just kind of sat back and like, I don't know if I want to interject in this conversation. And I remember our elder in the group kind of afterwards kind of pulled me aside and was like, hey, when things get crazy, I need you to kind of like get in a little bit more with that and kind of help me draw us back to what we're unified on, the actual theology of Christ and not the political agendas or whatever they may be.
Yeah.
That was a really weird moment, I think, because maybe the first time I ever saw that play out, where you just assume growing up, like everybody in your church is, especially when you're Southern Baptist, is Republican and pro-gun and pro this, and then it's like, well, that's not true. We're all like different things at all times.
Well, I think it was that way in a lot of times. It is that way because that's what the church is. That's the gospel has become the American dream in a lot of churches. And so if that's the way, then you're going to be on the same political, cultural, social side, because that is what you're idolizing. That's kind of become an idol in your church or in your convention or your denomination or whatever it is. And so then you think that's what it means to be a good Christian, is to be a good American or something. And it's like, well, what does this have to do with scripture? What does God have to say about these things? And so then we start idolizing tradition and culture rather than scripture and God and what we're actually supposed to be looking towards.
And one of the other area that I want to kind of get into is we had talked about before years ago. I don't know if you remember this even, but we were talking about at the time, the big thing in like young Christian life was like, what are you going to do? How are you going to go get the world? That was when like mission trips were big and everything. I feel like that's died a little bit, but not as much as you would think. But there's that idea of like, oh, you have to do something. What's your thing? What are you going to do? How are you going to leave your mark for the kingdom or whatever? And to an extent, I guess without realizing it, I had still fallen into that trap of like, well, what are you going to do? And there's a lot of ways I would rationalize it and kind of work my theology around it to make it a little bit not sound like an idolatry, kind of justified in my own head as something better. So we kind of got into this discussion about that, and it was like, okay, before you talk about going and conquer the world, like, did you pay rent this month? Because that's important too. And if you haven't done that, you're really not ready to go conquer the world. And it's the Jordan Peterson thing, like clean your room.
Yeah.
Okay, start there. As I thought about this more though, and I kind of want to get your take on this, one of the things that scares me, I think, is much like me, I think there's a lot of people who make old mistakes from new perspectives. So the whole thing came from like this idea of isolationism and disconnecting and getting out of culture and getting out of the city and going to the country and cutting off. And what kind of maybe startled me a little bit was it reminds me a lot of the old premillennial dispensational ways of like, it used to be, invest in gold. You sell your money for gold because money's going to be worthless, and mark of the beast, and you'll have gold. And people always take gold. Now it's Bitcoin. It's not gold anymore. It's Bitcoin, but it's the same idea. Like, put your money in Bitcoin, and that's going to, when the society collapses and the economy is dead, you'll have Bitcoin. It'll still work. And it used to be that kind of stuff. And I guess a little bit of it triggers me in that way, that I feel like I see us making the same mistakes just from a different perspective. I'm still like pulling out a little bit to be hands off.
Yeah.
And that does scare me a little bit, because I'm worried that it'll repeat the cycle that got us to the point where we are now, but just from a different perspective.
Yeah. I think we need to take back what's ours, which is the whole world.
Small task.
All right. But I think we need to be bolder than we are. I think we need to stop beating around the bush and kind of like, hey, do Christians have a place in this world? And it's like, what do you mean? This is God's stuff, and so and we are God's, and we are in the heirs to this. So and I always relate it to, your neighbor borrowed your lawnmower 6 months ago and never gave it back and just puts it in their garage, and you need to mow your lawn, and you're like, well, I kind of need to mow my lawn, but I want to see if I can, use my neighbor's lawnmower, but it's like, it's yours. he took it, and just didn't, kind of without asking, and never gave it back. So why are you asking if you can use it? It's yours. Go take it. You know what I mean? And that's how I think we need to see a lot of things in the world: education, family, business, music. I mean, government, law, all these things. These belong. There's no neutrality in those things. There's not this thing called law out there that there's a Christian version of and a pagan version of, right? It's all created by God, and we need to redeem it for God. And there's this weird hands-off approach, kind of like what you're talking about, even before with like the rapture cults and stuff, the apocalypse cults and stuff, of like, well, just let's not worry about it because Jesus is going to come back any second, and so let's not raise our kids. Let's not think about a legacy that we're going to leave for our great grandkids and worry at all about if they're going to be a Christian or not. Let's not worry about that because Jesus is going to come back before then. So, so we don't do anything about reclaiming it and redeeming that and leaving a legacy in this world for our own family or our church as Christians. And yeah, kind of just saying the same thing with like the new reformed kind of culture of like, go live on a homestead or something and raise chickens and just be by yourself and kind of off the grid kind of thing too. Is kind of the wrong approach too, because both of them have this retreat element to it, right? Like you're saying. Right. But what we need to do is just reclaim what's yours. Go get your lawnmower and mow your lawn. It's yours. You don't have to ask if you can do it. That's how we need to view science and education and cities and work, family, everything belongs to God. And we are heirs to that and inheritors of these things. And so I think as Christians need to be kingdom minded and building the kingdom right now in reclaiming these things and just doing it in a Christian context and a Christian framework.
And the thing we were talking about too, and where we split on that, was you had told me that you don't think that I value the homestead mentality enough, right? As far as the I don't value enough the idea of doing the menial or the mundane or the everyday, right? Which is true. You're not wrong in that assessment. That's correct. So that's where I started thinking about this, all things to all people inwardly, right? In that I feel personally like I've been really good at being all things to all people outwardly. I feel like, maybe not, but I feel like I have. But where I haven't is the other way, back inside towards the church and the actual unity that should come from the shared identity. That's where I think, and I don't think I'm the only one. I think there's a lot of people who have that element of either from my perspective where it's like, well, I don't value the mundane or I don't value the everyday, or the other perspective where it's like, well, I don't value the things that you're into. I don't care about movies or books or art or cinema. It doesn't matter. And I think there's like a divide there in church where there's like it's cultural cliques just inside church.
I think what I was getting at in that conversation with you was that as biblical men, that is an element, an aspect of biblical manhood that we need to be interested in.
Right. Yes.
And not but not for the sake of those interested in it.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's
right. Yes.
Well, I'm gonna, read my Bible because these people at church read their Bible and I want to be able to relate to them. Right. No, that's something you just need to prioritize.
Right.
As a man.
And what I'm working this out as we're talking about it. So kind of go with, I know it's off grid, but I feel like it's been sitting in my head for a whole week. So now I'm trying to pull it all in together. In doing that, I think we can appreciate somebody else's interest in those things more just from doing the thing, in the same way that like maybe you don't care about kayaking, but after you do it, like somebody who likes it, you understand why they like it more.
Yeah, but I think you're still missing what I'm saying.
No. I get what you're saying, but what I'm saying is
This isn't a point of interest. This is a point of
right. But
priority.
when I say point of interest, I mean more like home remodeling and stuff like that. Like if someone's super jazzed that they put an extension on their house or something, not just like, do you know what I mean? Are you following me?
I mean, I think so, but that is part of it too. Of just like, I think we can idolize anything, sure, but as far as like work or something, like when I hear someone talking about getting a promotion or trying to do something at work, I don't think, wow, they're really into work. I think they're doing what they're supposed to be doing as a man.
Right.
And so it's not like, well, they have an interest in this thing called work or this thing called
right.
home, home and hearth kind of thing.
Right.
That I think is a something that men have not prioritized enough in that, because we look at it as this kind of beaver cleaver picket fence kind of stupid American dream type thing. And it's like, no, I don't think, I think that's the way it's been twisted and kind of, idolized or whatever. But I also think it is a part of providing for your family and that being doing something, right? That's what we're talking about.
Right.
Like,
that's what we're talking about.
You Christians, he's on the sidelines, need to do something. Well, if a guy works his butt off, and to build a home and to build a life and provide for his family, that's doing something. And increasingly, that's becoming a rare thing. That's becoming the radical thing that you're talking about, mission trips and stuff.
Yes.
What are you gonna do for the kingdom? What are you gonna, plodding through a day job and providing for your family, kind of nobody really is doing, a lot. And these kind of, it's like, this thing out there, you want to be radical, get married, have children, have a home.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, those are normal kind of things, but they're increasingly not normal.
Okay.
Right.
So now to bring that back around, okay, you have that guy who he's a 9-to-5er. He takes care of his family. He pays his taxes. He pays his rent. That guy looks around at the world and he sees the craziness going on, and he sees Black Lives Matter protests over here and people dressed like Handmaid's Tale over here protesting for abortion and this, that, and the other. How does that guy approach being all things to all people in that sense when he can't maybe understand, because to me, the world looks like chaos where I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And I would have thought I was someone who had like a foot in where I could kind of read what's happening. But let's say someone who's even more removed from that and is like, like you said, they're doing all the things they're supposed to be doing, and the world looks like insanity outside to them. How does that person be all things to all people?
So the whole be all things to all people thing in this whole 1 Corinthians, like this kind of first half of 1 Corinthians, a lot of it really came to light when my study group talked about 1 Corinthians chapter 10, 23 through 11:1. And let me just read it because I think it really pinpoints what we're kind of getting at here. Okay, so it says, starting at 1 Corinthians 9:23, all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. Let no one seek his own good, but the good of his brother, or the good of his neighbor, not brother, neighbor. Eat whatever is sold in the meat market without raising any question on the ground of conscience. For the earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof. If one of the unbelievers invites you to dinner and you are disposed to go, eat whatever is set before you without raising any question on the ground of conscience. But if someone says to you, this has been offered in sacrifice, then do not eat it for the sake of the one who informed you, and for the sake of conscience. I do not mean your conscience, but his. For why should my liberty be determined by someone else's conscience? If I partake with thankfulness, why am I denounced because of that for which I give thanks? So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. Give no offense to Jews or to the Greeks or to the church of God, just as I try to please everyone in everything I do, not seeking my own advantage, but that of many, that they may be saved. Be imitators of me as I am of Christ. And he kind of buttons in on that, 11:1. Verse 1 Corinthians 11:1. Be imitators of me as I am of Christ. And so he's talking about that, like, I try to please everyone in everything I do. it's not trying to change your identity or be this kind of chameleon. So like what I thought of it in high school is like, I'm going to know everything about this and be culturally relevant to everyone and kind of have my foot in all the different camps and stuff and kind of know what they're, that's wrong. What this passage of Corinthians and all things to all people, I think means is to do those things to the glory of God, right? So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. And so if someone tells you this meat was sacrificed to idols, you can't partake of that to the glory of God. So what you have is a collision of glory versus glory. They're doing it to glorify the idol that they sacrificed the meat to, but you would be glorifying it. You would be eating it to the glory of God. And that's what he talks about too in eating of two tables, right? So what do I imply then? That food offered to idols is anything, 1 Corinthians 10, because there is one bread, we who are many are one body, for we all partake of the one bread. Consider the people of Israel. Are not those who eat the sacrifices participants in the altar? What do I imply then? That food offered to idols is anything, or that an idol is anything? No, I imply that what pagan sacrifice they offer to demons, not to God. I do not want you to be participants with demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the table of the Lord and the table of demons. So you can't that would be like be all things to all people, go to the mosque, go to the Mormon temple, go to whatever. No, you can't partake in both of those things. And so what we as Christians should be doing is reclaiming and redeeming everything and doing everything to the glory of God, including eating food and everything. And if someone else is trying to do it to the glory of their false idol or their demon, then you're in a collision, right? And so, and if they tell you this food has been sacrificed to idols, what they're doing is putting the context of the glory of their God. And so we can't partake in that, practice of eating it to the glory of their God. Like if you're at a friend's house and he's Buddhist or something and y'all are eating, you can eat the food no matter what. But if he like lifts his glass and says, thank you, Vishnu or Shiva, whatever, the context of what you're doing has changed. It's now being done to the glory of that God. Right. So you cannot partake in that. Right. And so that's why it's like, don't, do whatever. But if he says it's been offered, then he's putting in the context of glory to his God. And you can't partake in that. You can't drink of that cup. You can't eat of that table and bring glory to the actual God. Right. And that's what we should be in the business about. And so when he does that, though, that gives you an evangelistic opportunity to share the gospel and say, hey, you know what, man, I can't eat this now. Like if this is what this is, then I can't, but that gives you the opportunity to have that conversation. And that's why it's evangelistic, because you can respond to it. You can interact with it that way. Right. Because they brought it up as glory to their God. Right. When we should be doing all things to the glory of the actual God.
Like you said, they're not neutral about it. They're out front about it. And now you have to be, because they are as well.
Right. And they'll do everything like that to the glory of their God, as we should be. But when those collide, we can have that gospel conversation.
This gives some context to what we're talking about, because now two tables again, when we talk about things like family and home and providing and protecting, I think there is that tendency, and in my head the categories get blurred, and this is good because it's like, okay, wait, separate these, because it is that idea of like, we're doing this for the glory of tradition, or we're doing this for the glory of America, and it's like, no, we're doing this for the glory of God. And the two things are the same, just like pagans eat and Christians eat, but the glorification is different. Yeah. So I'm trying to see how we bring that to to that collision to head, where when you have this traditional Americanism, we can brush up against it and say, no, not traditional Americanism, Christianity.
Yeah. I mean, what it looks like is, instead of so let's take the guys you're talking about at church. Okay. I put in new tile. Oh man, I got my man cave or whatever. Mm-hmm. And oh man, like this guy at work was actually talking about this. He's like, oh, we got seats from the Chiefs, Kansas City Chiefs. I guess he's a big Kansas City Chiefs fan. He's like, we got actual seats from Arrowhead Stadium that before they demolished it, they sold all the seats or something. And my mom bought me one, and so we put him in the pool room, the pool table. He's got like a humidor. So he's got like his cigars and he's got like a pool table in there. And then he's got these cool, authentic from the stadium, Kansas City Chiefs seats, Right. I was like, man, that sounds freaking cool. Like, like that's the whole, we lusted after Jim Lee's office,
Right.
He coveted all the cool comic stuff he had in there and all the different, stuff he had. And it's that. And we see it every day on Instagram too. Instagram was like a coveting machine for that. Of like, oh man, that library. Oh man, that home office. Oh man, that like, wow, like that's cool. Those turntables. It's just coveting. Like I want all those things. But instead of having it be that kind of idolatrous like context, I think the way it can be turned, especially something like the home. Mm. It can be emphasized in that space. You can emphasize the ministry of hospitality and hosting a community group, inviting people over. How are we going to I'm going to buy an awesome house so that I can fill it every week with Bible studies and community groups and have people over and do stuff and feed people and cook for people and like have them come over and let's all watch a movie, like whatever. Like let's build that community and have that kind of thing rather than like I'm just going to sit in my awesome house by myself and just like love it.
Right.
I mean, and again, all things are law. There's nothing wrong. It's not sinful, right? To like have a cool home.
Right.
But there's also a great opportunity with something like that to turn it into that in practice the ministry of hospitality in opening up your home, your awesome, cool, spacious home to people to come over and smoke cigars, to play pool, to sit in those Kansas City Chiefs seats. Like, let's do it. Like, let's have that be like a regular thing. And that's building community and loving your neighbor, seeking the welfare of your neighbor first and stuff. And like, if you have an awesome home, you should be inviting your next door neighbor over to your home to smoke cigars in your cool humidor. You know what I mean? Like that's what it should be built for, not just for the sake of being cool or for yourself, but for your neighbor, for your church friends, for your Christian brothers and sisters, and just kind of to all kind of enjoy that kind of stuff together. I think that's a big part of doing all things that kind of eating and drinking to the glory of God, basically.
Okay. That's good. That's a good perspective. That's I could see that. And that's something the people at my church are really good at is that it's like, whose home is open this week? Like, well, we're going to this person's house. We're going to this person's house. That is something that's actually, I see play out in front of me. That's a really good, and that gets into a different area, but like the idolization of the family too is that weird. We were talking with our mutual friend about T-ball and like the parents that are pushing their kids because this is my meal ticket. This is my.
But it's not.
Your
kid will not be a professional baseball player.
Oh man, and it's the same thing. Like you have your kids in T-ball, and obviously it's not like for their glory or your glory. It's more like, you're doing the same thing from a different perspective. And I guess that's where it's been hard for me to understand is being able to, and I don't know why it shouldn't be hard to understand because it's the same kind of idea is like, you can make a comic for this, or you can make a comic for that. You can make a magazine for this, you can make a magazine for that. But that track never clicked in my head, I guess, of the, you can have a giant house to fill with your lust, or you can have a giant house to build the community.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Do all things to the glory of God,
That's a whole, and it's not unrelated. It is related, obviously, but that's a tricky one too. Because when we talk about all things, especially when he talks about eating and drinking, like what does that mean to eat and drink to the glory of God? Something like the most mundane thing. I can't think of a more mundane thing than eating and drinking.
I mean, it's that reclaiming of it. It's the reclaiming of these kind of earthly, natural things that God created. It's just putting in that context of glorifying God. And that's the point of all creation, And so we have to constantly be putting everything into that context. And that becomes an evangelistic opportunity when Yeah, that's what Lauren did. That's what my wife did. Yeah, we were there talking, and she's talking to another parent, and she's like talking about school. We talked about homeschool, which half our church does homeschool with us and stuff. So it's like, yeah, we all do it, and a lot of people in our church do homeschool. Oh, what church do you go to? Oh, go to the Well. Oh, here you go. Just gave the information and invited her to church. So yeah, I mean that's reclaiming that. That's doing T-ball to the glory of God. And yeah, and that's what I think we need to kind of lean into these things. Jeremiah 29. Let me see. I know it's like the graduation.
I was going to say, right? let me get out a graduation card that.
Yeah, no, not that. But Jeremiah's letter to the exiles, right?
Right.
He says, thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all the exiles whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat their produce. Take wives and have sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters, multiply there and do not decrease. But seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf. For in its welfare you will find your welfare. This is Babylon.
Right.
This is
literal Babylon.
Right, like not God's people. Wait. This is a Babylonian city. Seek the welfare of the Babylonian, pagan city? What? Yeah. And for thus says the Lord God of hosts, God of Israel, do not let your prophets and your diviners who are among you deceive you, not listen to the dreams that they dream, for it is a lie that they are prophesying to you in my name. I did not send them, declares the Lord. And so, I mean, that's the whole point, is like in that state, where San Antonio, wherever we are, wherever city you find yourself in, seek the welfare of the city. Do things that will seek the benefit of the citizens in that city, right? Build houses, plant gardens, start businesses, start schools, build families, get married, have children. Do that in the city you're in. And don't extract, don't retreat. Do it there. You're in exile. You're in this Babylonian pagan place. Do it, reclaim it, live there, and prosper there, And that's, if we want to take, the graduation verse and apply it to us, do it that way.
I was talking to one of my Instagram friends. He lives out in California, and he was posting pictures of the beach. He lives on Huntington Beach, and he was posting pictures of the beach and all this stuff. And I was like, man, that looks beautiful, but everything I see about California makes me think don't visit it. It's probably a terrible place. And he was talking about kind of like you're talking about, well, this is my home. This is where I'm from. This is the place that I want to reclaim. Why would I leave? This is worth fighting for. Yeah. And I thought that was a really good sentiment, because especially now, like we were talking about in the beginning, the tendency now is exodus, right? Leave California, leave Portland, leave all the cities, and come here, and let's make it more conservative and take all the element that would be helpful to that city out of that city and move it to somewhere that maybe really doesn't need it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you find yourself in one of those safe states or whatever, live as a free person, and try to do that, because as much as you can, just try and live that. It's kind of like in Chronicles of Narnia. I think it's the Silver Chair, where they're in the underground city, and they're having doubts of Narnia. They have a spell put on them, and they're doubting it. They don't know if Aslan's real. They don't know if the sun is real. They don't know if the above world is real, of Narnia, and they're being lied to and kind of manipulated, brainwashed and stuff. And they're saying there's no Narnia. There is no Narnia. This is just a figment of your imagination or whatever. And through tears, I think it's the character Puddleglum. I have to research all this and look it up. But yeah, it's he's through tears saying, in doubt, in uncertainty, saying, even if that's true, I'd rather live like a Narnian, and he's saying he has this idea of Narnia and Aslan and the good, the sunlight, but he's in this underground world and full of doubt and uncertainty. And he's saying, even if what you're saying is true, yeah, I don't know. I don't think it is, but you're saying it is, and everyone's saying it is. I'd rather live like a Narnian than this underground world that we're in right now. And I think that's how we have to see like our citizenship of heaven and of the kingdom and of the new earth to come rather than this earth. That's what we should be citizens of, the city of God, and not the city of man. Right. And so like, let's live in the city of man as citizens of the city of God. Right. And that's how in the Bible lays that out of like what we're to do, how we're to behave, how we're to raise our family, how we're to treat each other, all these things. And so let's do it that way. Let's do it the biblical Christian way in this fallen world as we're in right now.
So Puddlegum was a post-millennialist living in the dark age. That's true, man, because it's especially now it looks so dark, right? Especially with vaccine mandates coming down. However you feel about it, just that idea that the government has the ability to snap their fingers and say, this is the law now. And like you said, like we're electing kings. So like, what is it next year? What is it the year after that? What is it in 4 years? What is it in 8 years? And it becomes that cycle of like, especially with Dr. White's always talking about the Equality Act and what that's going to mean if that gets passed through. And I'm surprised it hasn't yet because there's nothing stopping them at this point. But just that idea of like protected classes codified in law to where, hey, maybe your preaching is hate speech. Maybe that's illegal. Like it just looks super dark. And it is that kind of desire to retreat. And I think I fall into that too, but in a different way. And it's to more be like revolutionary.
Yeah.
And thinking that a revolution is the way to, not even the way to fix things, but the illusion that it is. And just that's a different kind of retreat to check out of society, but just in a different way, to be counterculture or whatever, for the sake of not being a part of the thing itself, as opposed to like, no, still be a part of the culture, but that means maybe you're not the cool revolutionary guy. Maybe you're just the guy who raises a family and drives a minivan and all of that stuff.
Yeah. And I think too, like what we have a kind of a distorted view of what it means to like be persecuted or to like be a Christian in this pagan world or whatever.
Right.
We kind of created this sort of martyr syndrome of
yes.
I'm gonna stand for my faith, and I'm persecuted against, and and it's like, okay, maybe not, you know what I mean? Like those people are just kind of like that martyr syndrome. Of like, I'm persecuted. I'm gonna just be, they're gonna take this big stand or whatever.
Right.
And they cannot put it in any sort of gospel or biblical context of what they're doing. And it's very cultural, very just kind of churchy thing to like.
Well, it's romantic.
Stand on. Yeah, but it's just got no like weight behind it, I guess, or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Let me read this. I found this thing. The Puddleglum speech, or whatever. So it says, for context, Puddleglum and the Puddleglum, the Marshwiggle. It's like this weird little creature. Like, look, just go with it. It's Narnia. Along with 2 children and a prince, is trapped in an underground world by an evil witch. The witch used her powers to try to persuade her captors to forget the world above, telling them that their idea of a sun simply stems from the seeing lamps and wishing for a bigger, better lamp. And their idea of a lion stems from seeing cats and wishing for a bigger and better cat. After a few moments, Puddleglum answers. So it is that atheistic thing of like, no, look, what you're doing is you're projecting what we see in man and culture, and you're making a god. You're making it, this kind of big thing. And he says, one word, ma'am. He said, one word. All you've been saying is quite right. I shouldn't wonder. I'm a chap who always liked to know the worst and then put the best face I can on it. So I won't deny any of what you said. But there's one thing more to be said. Even so, suppose we have only dreamed or made up all those things, trees and grass and sun and moon and stars and Aslan himself. Suppose we have. Then all I can say is that in that case, the made up things seem a good deal more important than the real ones. Suppose this black pit of a kingdom of yours is the only world. Well, it strikes me as a pretty poor one. And that's a funny thing when you come to think of it. We're just babies making up a game, if you're right. But 4 babies playing a game can make a play world which licks your real world hollow. That's why I'm going to stand by the play world. I'm on Aslan's side, even if there isn't any Aslan to lead it. I'm going to live as like Narnian as I can, even if there isn't any Narnia. So thanking you kindly for your supper, if these 2 gentlemen and the young lady are ready, we're leaving your court at once and setting out in the dark to spend our lives looking for overland. Not that our lives will be very long, I should think, but that's a small loss if the world's as dull a place as you say. Dude.
That's man.
You know, it's like, look, if you're saying this is a myth, then this myth is better than any truth you have to offer of anything here, because it's obviously false. That's the kind of thing. I was having a conversation with someone at church about who's struggling with assurance in faith, assurance of faith, and like, well, am I saved? Like I struggle with sin, and I don't have the kind of convictions I see in other people who are reading their Bible and praying and doing great things in church and stuff. And like, why don't I have that? Why don't I have that feeling and that conviction to do that? Maybe I'm not saved. Maybe this is, well, I don't know. Maybe I'm just not part of it, or like, I'm not been called or something, And what I told him was, when I think about that, like, am I a Christian? Do I really believe all this stuff? I say I believe this. I say I have faith in this. I've proclaimed these things. I've professed whatever. What do I really? But I don't know. I've got doubts. I've got questions. I don't know certain things, and people stump me, and I don't know. But what I told him, I said, for me, you got to believe something. There's no not believing anything, right? So we have this Christian worldview, Christian biblical godly worldview of things, of the world. If I don't believe this, then I'll be believing something else, right?
Right.
Well, what else would I believe? Well, what else is out there? Let's look at atheism. Let's look at the cowardly atheism, agnosticism. Let's look at what are the worldview. I gotta believe something. I gotta filter everything through some kind of worldview. Well, what is it? What's out there? Hindu, Islam, like what, and I think just kind of being in the world of apologetics, kind of studying those worldviews and how to contend with them for the gospel and with Christianity, I kind of see like, well, those are absurd. Those fall flat on them. Those are contradicting themselves, and they don't explain what we see to be true with humanity and sin and the world and everything. So what would I go? What would I do? It's kind of like when Jesus asked the disciples, will you leave me too?
Right.
Will you go? And they said, well, you have the truth. Where will we go?
Where else are we going to go?
There's nothing else out there.
Right.
This is the truth. And so it's like, well, I'm not going to not believe nothing.
Right.
And not believe anything. I have to believe some kind of worldview. Well, this is it. What other worldviews can compare to this? Nothing. So when you kind of run those scenarios of like, well, what am I going to be, Muslim? What does that say? Okay, it's just full of contradiction, full of nothing. Like, Christianity is it's like it's the absurdity of the contrary, it's absurdity of the alternative. It's like, well, that's it. There's no other truth out there. This is it. Where would we go? And so assurance of faith, I mean, that kind of solidified it for me. Like, there's just nothing else out there. I mean, I don't understand a lot of these things sometimes. I have questions. I don't like some of these things sometimes. It takes away my autonomy, my free choice, and being the God of myself or whatever. Okay, I don't like that. But that's true. I mean, I'm sorry. Like, that's what we got.
I like that part at the end about knowing that their life won't be long, but if the world is like she says it is, then what's the point anyway? That's so good, because it's so true. Because there's so many people that are like burning themselves out for dirt and flesh and stuff that just wastes and dies and withers, and like, my freedom and my autonomy, and then you die and then you waste away and everything was worth nothing because it didn't matter.
Like the small loss of the world is dull place, as you say.
Right. That's so true.
To live is Christ, and to die is gain. Yeah,
man. That's it's. I didn't read that as a child, so I wonder how kids process that reading Narnia. If that like smacks them over the head, or if it just kind of like goes over and they don't really.
It did for me. I read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I think I read the volume where that comes third.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's somewhere that comes first, and then like there's a Magician's Nephew and stuff that comes like as a prequel, because there's it's set in a different timeline.
Okay.
And they did republish it to where it was third or first or whatever. But I think it was the third one, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, at my Nana's house, and it had a 3 on the spine, and as the Chronicles of Narnia, Lion, the Witch, and Wardrobe, and I didn't know what that meant, but I saw a 3. I was like, "What's that? What's the 3? Why is there a 3 on the spine of this?" And my nana said, "Oh, this is book 3 in a series of 7 books. They're called the Chronicles of Narnia." And I was like, you don't understand how like happy I was of like, there's more, It was like, oh, because I thought this is it. I thought this was the story. Right. Like, this is it.
Right.
And then like, I can go back to Narnia. Like, yes, like, whoa, there's 7 books. And so I was like, what? I need them. Where are they? We're like, I need to get the books. And just got them all and just like read them and stuff and have read them. And yeah, man, C.S. Lewis, man, Chronicles of Narnia is really amazing. Really, really good stuff. And there's this whole thing too of like medieval cosmology and stuff, and how the 7 planets and like man, and there's a book where this guy breaks it down called Planet Narnia, and he like kind of goes through and how like I haven't read it yet, but Doug Wilson talks about it. It sounds amazing, but where he like kind of relates each book to different planets in the medieval cosmology. I was like, whoa, that's super cool.
Well, that's because Lewis was a giant history dork.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he has that thing the thing that I like about Wilson too is being able to take these grandiose ideas and just make them super digestible. Just take them down and just like hit you in the face with it, and you get it even if you don't fully get it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a lost art now, but man, that's really, especially now thinking about death more, just that idea that's like, well, if this is it, I'd rather be gone, because if this is it, this is nothing.
Right.
Man. Well,
let me read from The City of God.
Yes, we're about to ask you about that.
Book 2, some sections from City of God by Augustine. For in the ruin of the city, it was stone and timber which fell to the ground, but in the lives of those Romans, we saw the collapse not of material, but of moral defenses, not of material, but of spiritual grandeur. The lust that burned in their hearts was more deadly than the flame which consumed their dwellings. It's just the destruction of nations, man. You fall in morality and spirit before. The degradation of the traditional morality ceased to be a gradual decline and became a torrential downhill rush. So this is Augustine talking about the fall of Rome, which he saw. But true justice is found only in that commonwealth whose founder and ruler is Christ. It's true, man. We talk about social justice, talk about racial justice. There's only one justice, and that's biblical, godly justice. And we as Christians have, I think, a responsibility as Christians in our discipleship and our growth and maturity and faith to seek out that justice, true law, true righteousness, true friendship, true family, true government, everything. There's a right biblical way to do it. And we as Christians need to be pursuing that in the city we live in. Right.
That's that already not yet idea, right? Like citizens of heaven living on earth.
But
is a hard,
but kind of already.
Right.
Well, because what people usually mean when they say that is already, but not really.
Right. Yes. And there is a difference. Started, but not realized, maybe is a better way to say it.
Right. But like, what if we believed we could have a hand in realizing it?
Right. Yes.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's what it comes down to. It's like that eschatological post-mill thing of like what you think about the end affects how you live today.
Man, that's a whole other trail to go down. Just that whole thing. But all right. Well, anyways, hour and a half. Last off, I just wanted to talk about Norm a little bit because that was kind of a shock when he died. I was having lunch with my wife and we were sitting down. And I just happened to be scrolling through and just said breaking Norm Macdonald dead. And I was like, what? I hadn't thought about him in a little while, but then I saw that he died, and he was apparently cancer, and he kept it secret until the end, which is interesting. That's an interesting way to go. That's an interesting choice in modern times to not make your death a spectacle, or if your life is a spectacle, not to make your death a spectacle.
Yeah.
But Norm was one of those guys that was brilliant in how chaotic he was. To me, like if something was live and Norm was on, it was like, oh, this is gonna be good. I gotta watch how this goes down.
Yeah, he definitely disrupted expectations and like, oh, you don't want me to do that? I'm gonna have to.
Definitely gonna do it now.
Yeah.
He was kind of the last guy that did that now, or like, in the present age. Nobody really does that anymore. There's not real disruption. There's like stage disruption or faux disruption or socially acceptable disruption. But right. I remember he was there was this interview when he had an ABC sitcom for a while, and he was on The View when, like, the original View, when they did it live, and he was on there just for publicity. And the way he tells the story about it is everything that happened was incidental. And while he was on TV, he was like, I'm just gonna say it. But apparently he just ran into the president somewhere when Bush was president. And this was when he was vilified. So they got a picture together because he was like, yeah, I ran into the president. I'm gonna take a picture. And they put the picture up on the big screen, and they were like, oh, so you're a Bush supporter, Norm? Is that what's going on? And he had heard offhandedly somebody talking about the Clinton body count thing. Just offhandedly heard it. He didn't know anything about it. He didn't look into it, but he just remembered that in the back of his head. And he just says on live TV to Barbara Walters, yeah, I just think we should get the murder out of the White House. And just the show just melted down from that point forward.
He was on The View a few times, right? Like, why did they
few times?
What was the deal? What was his connection with The View? Like,
it had to be ratings is the only thing I could think of. People, because they knew people would watch it.
I remember the one clip I saw where he's talking about himself, and he's like talking about just like drinks and gambles and doesn't care, and like he's just kind of this crazy wild guy. It's just like, you say you always think, what kind of woman would be interested in a man like you? Why would somebody want to be with you? And he's like, well, I make a lot of money.
Oh man.
Yeah, he was crazy. He was a wild guy.
But yeah, dead out of the blue, and that just kind of stuck out.
Yeah, cancer, man. It's crazy.
I've been thinking, I know this is a real downer, but I've been thinking about death a lot more lately, obviously. Yeah. And just, percolate. And then Kanye's album came out, so his mother's death and all that's floating around. Mm-hmm. And it's just this real dark specter over like society right now of like death hovering over everybody.
Yeah.
It's so weird. And I guess what brings that to mind is what we're talking about, that Citizens of Heaven, that optimistic perspective in the face of like a world that's obsessed with death or covered by death or focused on death.
Oh, when tragedy does strike, I mean, that's when the rubber meets the road of what you believe, when it hits home, that closely. It's just like, okay, I say I believe all these things. Here it is. What's my response? Am I going to respond biblically, or am I going to respond fleshly?
I can't imagine what it must feel like to not believe in something right now.
Right.
I can't like fathom just not having any hope in anything at all and living now.
Well, and see, that's why I think the pagans have gained a foothold, is because they are acting as if right now matters, and maybe if Christians did, things would change. Maybe if we took this life and this world a little more seriously in redeeming and engaging and enraging with it, maybe instead of like checking out either mentally or spiritually or physically, moving away and just forgetting it, maybe things would change. What if we believed the gospel would succeed in human history, and that would usher in the eschaton? Hey, maybe you kind of tend to hit what you aim for. If we're aiming for twiddle our thumbs until we die, until whatever, that's kind of what we're getting. Yeah. We're letting the pagans kind of take over what rightfully belongs to God and us. But if we pretended like that lawnmower is ours and had a boldness to just take it, I mean, We'd have a nice cut lawn.
Well, we've done about an hour and a half, so yeah, we'll go ahead and head out on here. So just kind of a last thought on all of that. I had this thought recently about sleepwalking through life, and I feel like that's kind of what everybody's doing right now, is kind of sleepwalking through life, right? Like, we just want to get through. When this is over, we just want to get through. When's this going to be over? When's this going to be over? Well, I don't know, and it might not be. Realistically, I don't. Maybe sometimes diseases disappear. Maybe sometimes they don't, and maybe sometimes this is just life now.
Yeah.
But we don't really have the option to sleepwalk through life. We just kind of have to be in it, and like, what does it look like to live through life, to continue to live? So,
yeah,
I don't know. Dwell on that. Until next time, this is the time. This is the place. We'll see you guys.
Matt.